So we'll call to order this regular council meeting for Tuesday, February 1st. To start with, I'd like to do the traditional territory acknowledgement, acknowledging that we're fortunate to be gathered here today on the territory of the Símpcwemc people who've been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Is there any late items to introduce?
No, sir.
Okay, so Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I don't know, because we did have that one item that didn't quite get finished, so I don't know if we need to add that, Mr. Thomas.
A member of council can certainly add that for sure.
Okay.
Perfect. So we'll add the tourism relief funding grant, and perhaps we should add that in the committee section underneath 14.2.
Yeah, so you're suggesting we break out of committee and move back into the committee of the whole?
Yeah, that's how I understand it would do. Mr. Thomas, does that make sense?
Absolutely, you can certainly do that.
Okay, so we'll add it under 14.2 and rejoin that committee for that conversation. All right, so can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All in favor? All right. And adoption of the minutes. Can I get movement to adopt the minutes from January 18th? Councillor Taylor and Councillor Frizzle. All right, all in favor? Great. Okay, we'll move on to 6, development and zoning. So we have development variance permits number DVP 2103 and a recommendation. Do we have someone who's speaking to this?
Yes, we do. We have planning services. Alex should be speaking to this.
Yes, hi, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just do a screen share here so I can bring up the PowerPoint. Here we go. Hopefully everyone can see that now. So this application is a development variance permit. It's for property at 444 Clearwater Valley Road. And it's a variance to vary the subdivision servicing bylaw. So the entire property currently is about 7.5 hectares outlined in red. That's about 18.5 acres. And the property has dual zoning currently. So there's an area at the front here that is zone C1, general commercial. And the owner has a office building, commercial building located on this part of the property. The remainder of the property in the back here, which is about 14 acres, almost 15 acres, is zoned RL1 rural, which is kind of a rural residential zoning. So it's one property with dual zoning. The property is also designated commercial in the official community plan, aligning with the area that's zoned commercial, and rural resource aligning with the area that's zoned RL1 rural. So the owner has a subdivision application currently in with the district, and it's to create 2 lots, essentially along the zoning boundary. So it would create 1 lot, approximately 4 acres at the front here that is all zoned C1 general commercial, and that would include the current office that's on the property. And then the owner would like a second lot towards the back, access via panhandle. So this panhandle would provide access off Clearwater Valley Road and provide access to this second lot. So it is a 2-lot subdivision, basically following the zoning boundary. And the panhandle itself here will be about 20 meters wide and a little over 100 meters long, accessing this 1 lot. So the property is located within service level 1, according to the subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 168. And this area requires, connection to the municipal sewer system and municipal water system at time of subdivision. So the owner has submitted a detailed letter, and it's enclosed in the council report and on your agenda, basically outlining that the connection to the municipal sewer system as required under the subdivision would be cost prohibitive for this subdivision. And thus he's applied for this variance to vary the bylaw requirement and try to have that requirement waived. So he's applying, so the owner has requested that both lots not be connected to the municipal sewer system. The current office building here is already connected to an on-site sewage disposal system. And for the new lot, the owner is proposing to also develop a new on-site sewage disposal system. So the owner has requested a full exemption from connection to the sewer system. Staff do not support a full exemption. There is no technical rationale for not connecting. The only rationale is cost. And from the staff's point of view, we really have to rely on technical factors, not so much on cost. So our recommendation, and the way that the variance permit has been worded in your agenda, is that only the RL1 portion of the property would be exempt and could connect to an on-site sewage disposal system. The owner is also agreeable to enter into a covenant for this property that would basically get registered on title and warn future owners that if this RL1 zone portion of property is ever rezoned and tried to be developed into smaller lots, that at that time those lots would have to connect to the municipal system. That way there's no expectation that in the future this entire lot, if it's ever developed further, would be exempt. However, staff recommend that the commercial lot be connected as per the bylaw. And we appreciate there is significant cost to development, but cost should not be used to vary requirements, as that could set a precedent for future subdivision if owners simply apply to council and not want to connect or not want to meet the requirements of the servicing bylaw. But I just want to emphasize that what the applicant has asked for is not the same with our recommendation today. We are recommending a partial, essentially, and the owner is asking that it not be required to connect on either lot. If council wishes to grant a full exemption as requested by the owner, we would just need a further resolution and then directing staff to amend the proposed variance before the next consideration. So today's recommendation is simply for council to authorize staff to issue a notice of intent and allow staff to notify the neighboring public. If that authorization is granted, then the application will come back before council at a next or future meeting one more time, where you can take in public input, potentially hear from the owner directly, and then deliberate a final decision on it. So hopefully that provides an overview. I'd be happy to try to answer some questions.
Okay, do we have any questions on the presentation from council?
Councillor Herring, I have a question.
Thanks, Councillor Sim. It's
I know it's the
hard when we're
two-screen thing.
sharing.
I know. My question is, because I appreciate that where the part of land that would be subdivided, that is, I mean, it's just such great opportunity to be eventually divided into other lots. And I see that as invaluable for our community. We're looking for new opportunities. It would be kind of that residential. There's lots of positives there. And yet I also understanding front loading costs to businesses, especially for businesses who, you know, we have just gone through a pandemic. Is there any ability that we attach in any sort of our own covenant, is the fact that once the property sells, that the commercial property would then be attached?
Yeah, I don't think it can be done based on sale. It might be able to be worded such that if there's a new building and there's a new building permit, that could trigger it, or future subdivision, but I'm not aware, I've never seen it where it's based on sale, because technically or normally the municipality is not involved when a property changes hands or is sold, so it's not normally triggered on a sale.
So in that vein, the current septic system that's on the property, I don't know, that one,
Yep.
by approving the recommended option, what changes for that? Like, are they required to dismantle their septic system and connect, or is this really just if they were to build another building, it would have to join the sewer system?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm wondering if Chris from True could also speak to this. Certainly the bylaw requires connection. Now I'm not sure about the building itself and what would happen with the existing on-site sewage system. Chris.
Thanks, Alex. I'll try and speak to that. The district's subdivision servicing bylaw is clear in that it states, and I have a copy, sewage collection system connected to the district sanitary sewer system, and then it lists a number of things that are included with that. That wording is quite clear. What it's not clear on is what needs to be connected. Now, it's not clear to me if there is a trigger that at time of subdivision, an existing building, if there's no change to the building. So if this commercial office space stays as is, no expansion, no adjustment, no building permit issued, no, as near as I can tell, there is no trigger that says connect. Now, the works required to facilitate the subdivision need to be installed, certified, and then connected to the district's existing sewage collection system. But as it relates to an individual building on private property, I can't find specific wording related to that instance. It's a tricky situation.
So in other words, it might be possible that the property is connected in that the line is brought across the road and onto the property, but the building itself may not have to connect to it right away.
Correct. That may be an instance that happens. You get into a sewer connection bylaw enforcement at that stage, as opposed to a subdivision servicing bylaw. Once you move on to private property, it more falls under a building permit, subdivision or sewer connection trigger.
And my understanding is that the real cost and the real concern here is having to bring the line across the road. I think that's where the main cost is, not so much the connection or the loss of the septic system, but just bringing the line over is significant.
That would be, yeah, my understanding would be similar. The existing lift station is just left of your edge of your screen, bringing a gravity system across to the property line. Correct.
If I could throw out a quick question, is that okay, Councillor Herring?
Please do, Councillor Banford. Yeah, I can't see hands up, so please,
No, I know.
if you've got a question, jump in.
So two quick questions then. One of them first relates to the second part where the larger portion of the lot. Is that the zoning, is that changing in that zoning or not? Or is the zoning just staying the same? That's the first question. And the other question then would be, right now they probably have to pay a parcel tax for sewer anyway, because sewer is available in front of the building. And if they have a system that's working, I'm kind of leaning a little bit towards the fact if there's a way to make it a trigger that if they add anything new, if they develop the property anything further, then maybe that's where we should be heading towards, other than saying tear apart what you have that's working and force somebody to do something else, because they're still probably paying a parcel tax anyway, I would assume, because the sewer is available. Is that correct?
So on the first question, the property would remain zoned, this portion of the property would remain zoned RL1 rural. It allows down to 10-acre lots. The lot would be about 14 acres. So that would be as small as it could go. If it ever wants to get subdivided further, it would need a rezoning that would come before council at that point. So it would remain zoned RL1 until somebody applied in the future or council changed the zoning. Regarding the parcel tax, I don't know if someone else on the call here can answer that one.
With respect to the parcel tax piece, I would research that and get back to council for sure.
Councillor Herring, I have a question.
Okay, so does anyone in this conversation want to make the motion to issue the notice of intent? My understanding is
I
this
think
is...
Councillor Taylor had a question first,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
That's okay. So I'm very much in agreement with Councillor Banford. My concern is that we're asking a property owner. So I'm assuming, like, right now this property has a septic, and I'm assuming that that's because it's somehow grandfathered in, maybe before the bylaw was introduced, and that the subdivision creates the removal of that grandfather approach or applicability, and so it kind of creates it as a new property. But my concern is that we're then asking a property owner to connect to something and invest in something that they don't need. And it would be the other way, like if it was the other way around and the property that didn't have any form of sewage system was closer to the sewage line, you would expect that we would push for that. But it's kind of the fact that they already have something in place. It's kind of concerning that we're kind of pushing to remove that grandfather status, essentially, of an existing system. If we went ahead with the partial at this point, what options does that leave? Like, could we go down the route of a second partial like later, or is it like the only way that we remove this requirement is if we do it today for the C1 property?
I think if you're leaning that way, it would be best to simply note that in today's resolution, such that it's advertised as a full exemption. And then if you choose to only do the partial at the next meeting, when you make the final decision, at least the neighbors have been notified that you were considering a full and only granted a partial, as opposed to advertising it as a partial and then surprise granting a full, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That to me, I think would be my preference, because I do think we need to have a conversation about what's the right thing to do here. And I recognize the comments in the report around setting precedent. But yeah, it's just the fact that there's something there existing and we're asking for them to connect up to our sewage system. And you know, there's a system there that's up and running.
Councillor Herring, my question is also in regards, and I don't know if we're calling it an easement, but it's the 100 meter by 20 meter. Would that eventually, like, let's make an assumption that that larger piece of acreage would be subdivided at some point in time, they would ask for that. Is that large enough?
Yeah, so that's why they require the 20-meter width, because that's the standard of a road.
Okay, I didn't know that. So
yeah, so theoretically, if it's kind of pre-aligned for that, the approving officer requires that width in case this ever gets developed, then this area of Panhandle would become the road.
Okay, and then does that also, and again, you're going to help me with that one. Does that allow for a road allowance on that as well? Just noting snow clearing and all of that, because it's.
Yes, the 20 meters is standard width that would allow both the paved road and then whatever the standard might be, sidewalk, trail. That allowance allows for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, further questions or discussion from council? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to issue this notice of intent to consider approval of variance permit DVP 2103?
So I would like to make the motion that we issue the notice, but with the full exemption, variance as requested by the property owner, as opposed to the partial.
Okay, do I have a seconder on that motion?
I just want to maybe ask for more discussion before we second it, and we can't speak to staff. So I think that the intent, Councillor Taylor, is, and I agree, like, why rip up stuff, you know, when it's something serviceable? I think that that's difficult, because I think that where we are all looking is for that longer term. What I am wondering is how do we actually capture that cost at some point in time? And, you know, that it's not there. And I wish there was more that we could attach it as an IOU or something. So I'd be curious if there's any more thoughts on that. And I just want to go back to what Councillor Banford was asking, and does that play in any further before we make before we move forward with the motion?
If I can just add to your question, Councillor Sims, real quick. I'll go to Alex, who we've dealt with for a long time as far as staff goes. If we go where we're heading to right now with the motion and go forward with just the notice of motion or the notice of intent for a full exemption, a partial exemption, if we decide to go there, can we do a partial exemption that you were checking out, Alex, that would be if any further development occurs to that lot, a new building put on it, anything else, then the bylaw kicks into effect. But I guess that's where I'm at. If the partial exemption would be, leave it the way it is because it's working for you, but if you change anything else on that commercial lot, here you go, the bylaw kicks in. So is that where we could head with a full exemption and then still come back to council? Or is that a partial exemption right up front? I guess I'm asking Alex out. As long as, Alex, you're comfortable with where we're going, that would be okay.
Yeah, no, I think that would work. I mean, even if you ask us to word it as a full exemption now, and then at the next meeting you decide only to do a partial, that's totally fine. So you're not bound to do a full simply because we're advertising it as such. Regarding the other options, I mean, I would give staff a little bit more time to research some options. I think a covenant definitely would be needed, and that's the same covenant we recommended on this RL1 zone piece that will basically warn future owners that they will have to connect. I just don't think it can be triggered on sale, but we could trigger it on future building permit, future other development application that may trigger it. And we could research that further for the next meeting as well.
That sounds perfect to me. Thanks, Alex.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I do agree more discussion is needed. My understanding is that this allows for that discussion, as opposed to if we went with partial, we then close off the discussion around the full. At least if we go with full, we keep the discussion open that could still lead us back to partial or covenants on the full. So yeah, that's why I'm making that motion.
Thanks to the input from Mr. Crows, I'd like to second that motion then for the full.
Okay, great. All in favor? Or actually, no, it's discussion now. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, and that is passed. Moving on, we have number 7, that's unfinished business, and it's policy number 2201, the purchasing policy. There is a recommendation there. Does anyone wish to speak to this?
Yes, so we took the policy to legal for review. The question came back, what type of review would the district like? We said you have creative control effectively and propose something that builds on what was done by the previous consultant, and the result is what you have before you. It expands a little bit more about the evaluation committee structure for reviewing procurement processes, and it makes sure that it complies with the various procurement laws that are applicable, and also takes into consideration local interests.
Okay, questions from council? Okay, not seeing any. I just wanted to flag that I'm having some major issues with my TELUS internet today. So if I do cut out, if someone could just, sing and dance, distract everyone until I get back, that would be super appreciated.
I nominate Councillor Banford to sing and dance.
All right. So if we have no questions regarding this, does someone want to move the recommendation for the new purchasing policy as presented? Oh, Councillor Frizzle. Okay, and Councillor Banford, I assume you're seconding? Okay, yeah, and all those in favor? And that's passed. Okay, we have no public and statutory hearings, no presentations. We have a delegation from Yellowhead Community Services Raider Reader. Do we have someone here to speak to that, or?
It does not appear to be the case.
I have
Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I had thought that when the infamous spelling bee went in, we had actually contributed funds to raise a reader already.
Okay.
I do recall that discussion last year.
Well, the
I would
spelling
have-
bee was just when, in November?
Yes, I know why she was coming. It was coming to thank us.
Oh,
Oh, that's why she was coming, so I'm surprised she's not here.
Yeah.
Maybe it could be tabled.
Sure.
Yeah, let's table this for next time, just in case there is a delegation in the future. Okay, so in that case, moving on to mayor's report. Obviously, there's no mayor here today, so we can skip that. Council reports. Councillor Banford.
Thank you. Been pretty quiet for me, working with the cemetery committee, the new one that's formed in that working group. Just dealing with some emails on that, and other than that, just keeping up on council business. So that's pretty much it for the last couple of weeks. Thank you.
Councillor Frizzle.
Pretty quiet for me too. Just want to let you know that Sit and Be Fit had its first session in the new wellness center, and everybody seemed to really like it. So that's good news. The man shed is going strong. They've got lots of projects on the go. They've got the telephone that we're going to be putting up on one of the trails that's ready to go. So as soon as spring comes, it'll be going up. And we just got word from the senior society, just got word that we got funding from the community forest. So we can carry on with our lunches and whatnot. So we're pretty excited about that. And that's my report.
Great. For my report, I've got nothing much to update other than I would say it's been quiet on a council work front, but very loud on a public input front. I've been hearing from tons and tons of people about everything from vaccine mandates on a daily basis to people concerned about development cost charges and kind of interested in development. I've got a few emails about that after the newspaper article that went out last week, and I thought that was interesting. So, but yeah, aside from that, nothing to report. So we'll go on to Councillor Sim.
Thanks very much. Like many of you, but it was so riveting that I think you forgot, but we went to the CAO workshop. And that was well done, and certainly to discuss future priorities and just what type of a vision that this council is going to lead, noting that there is an election come October. So looking towards that next stage in our community growth. I also just want to acknowledge the support of the RCMP in leading the trucker contingent on the weekend. So that was just such good community support. Looking around the community, what can't you do here? The cross-country ski trails are outstanding. The ski hill is now open 2 nights a week for night skiing. The Rotary and their Iceman days it was so wonderful to see all those people out. That was outstanding. And then to hear that the Birch Lake is going to move ahead. So another, something to look forward to. And I understand that the ski school program, they're working to go ahead starting next week. So they're going to be making use of a grant from the North Thompson Community Foundation from last year. So it's going to help offset costs for skiing for you. So that's good. And then having participated in the Healthy Living program and just the diversity of people that are coming out and making good on it. And I think finding some security in that push-pull elastic band thing about our programming is starting to gain some momentum, and just seeing and hearing from people who are just like, thank you for making this possible. And my favorite story was a woman who said, you know, in September I couldn't have done this, but now I can. And just hearing that sense of empowerment was pretty exciting. So glad that we have those things going on in our communities.
And we'll go over to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Sim beat me to it, but yeah, the strategy workshop was great. Not only just all the things that we've got planned, but like going through all the things that have been achieved as well was really great to see. I always acknowledge it's the Lunar New Year today, so Happy New Year to anybody celebrating Lunar New Year. And we're halfway through the school year officially, because the high school's switching to semester 2, so we're halfway there. Keep up the good work, students and parents. The summer will be here before we know it.
Okay, and we have no committee of the whole minutes. In terms of committee of the whole reports, we'll go to Councillor Taylor on the Government Operations Committee.
Oh, and I've lost my place. Bear with me. So our next meeting is February 15th.
Okay, and Councillor Sim on the Community and Economic Development and Infrastructure.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a motion that we move into committee of the whole for this one and finish off that last agenda item.
Okay, can I get a seconder on that?
I can second that.
Councillor Taylor, all in favor? Okay, and so we will move into committee of the whole. And our topic was 11.2 on that agenda, which was tourism relief funding grant.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring forward something to the committee. And I'm just going to give the big picture thought of, let's build a community center at the Sportsplex. So if we kind of think about, you know, that big one. And yes, it's a lofty goal. And the big idea is to expand the use of this facility to include more people in our community and to provide greater value to the Valley for year-round access. So yes, first thought, it could be expensive, really expensive. If we look to the first dressing room expansion, which was around $600,000, and it seemed impossible. And yet because of that expansion, you know, our community became so well known for lots of different tournaments, a number of provincials, and it was built with the ability to have a second floor on it. So yeah, it's a big picture idea, and maybe it's too big a concept, and maybe it's not worth something considering. But what if we could do it? And what if we secured some grants and leveraged some dollars with that? Look at what's been accomplished in this community, the trails, the biomass, and again, you know, just expanding on that dressing room. So big infrastructure, and we've been able to do it in the community. So could we do it again? There is this tourism infrastructure grant available, and it's designed for some of those larger picture ideas. And so if we were to imagine a new space that allowed for some winter walking, for example, for having a year-round gym, for maybe having a physio, lots of different opportunities. We could become a training center for sports teams. What about a space that could be transformative for doing events? I mean, it is truly up there. It's a blueprint. It's a blank slate. We can do lots of different things. Even downstairs, we can imagine a lobby refresh, redesigning the spaces, maybe even some offices. So the big picture certainly can't be funded on tax dollars. We do need something else. And so if we position the expansion under tourism infrastructure, the Sportsplex could be designed as a 4-season tournament event opportunity. As I said, the training center, and as well as quality of life. So I think, and I don't know if staff is able to speak to this, but I understand that minor hockey was looking at a space for something that's called a rapid shot and looking for a home for that. And that seems like just an awesome opportunity. It is this particular facility, if I understand it, it's a mechanism that allows for strengthening of shooting, which, okay, maybe it's just designed for hockey, but what if there was room to discuss that for tourism? So one of our objectives for this expansion under 4 season is our tourism strategy was winter and summer. So bring in groups to do some ice skating, bring in groups to learn how to do some curling. It was successful in Canmore, and it leveraged some of those groups, which might offset some of the operating costs that are taxpayer borne. So again, to capitalize on that tournament concept, looking to expand to 4 season. As part of this rural infrastructure, or for the tourism infrastructure, so part of the criteria is that they're looking for rural resource dependent communities, which is definitely us. They're definitely looking at how to elevate that middle income, and they're looking for big projects that would create a 4 season opportunity. So our sportsplex, which is now not that, with this it could be. Why I bring this up is because in the budget, we've actually allocated money for a concept plan. So I'm not suggesting we commit to it, but I am suggesting that this concept plan, if we pushed it forward a little bit sooner, it could then be fostered into the intake for the tourism infrastructure grant. It's a lot of information. Questions? Councillor Herring.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how this would fit in terms of staff time and priorities right now. Like I really like the idea and I am dying for a gym. Oh man, would it be nice to have a gym. But I'm just wondering if we're in a position where we can actually jump on this particular grant on this particular project right now.
So I noticed that Brent's come off camera. I don't know if you have anything to say on that. All I can say is that it was staff who brought forward the proposal to do the expansion one. So that's moving ahead anyway. So it seems to me that that isn't an initial comment on that availability. They brought it forward. We're just trying to find a way to finance it. Councillor Taylor.
What's the timing on the grant intake? How accelerated will it need to be?
Yeah, no, I know. So we were looking at that, and it's looking like it's one of those great grants that are it's quite open and it's moving through sort of 2022 and in. Just listening to some of the federal governments as well as our provincial governments, they're acknowledging that the tourism sector has been absolutely hammered. So they need to make those investments, but people need to be able to come out of this to figure out what that landscape is. So I believe it's kind of like April, May, and an ongoing intake. It would maybe allow us to do that concept plan, get some community input, also look for some letters of support. But you know, and it is such a big picture that this is just the small first step, but it does give us an avenue to work towards, not necessarily to commit to, but you know, just looking to those granting. I haven't seen anything for big infrastructure projects. I've seen more for that social development that's been coming out of you know, some of the press releases, etc. So I'm just wondering if we should be well suited to be ready for it and to participate. Councillor Frizzle?
Well, with our talk about increasing housing, and that means increasing people, I like the idea of having a place for people, all these new people have something to do, someplace to go, some event to attend, some activity, some gym to go work at, whatever. I think combining the two, it's big, that's really big, but you know, you can find reasons to make it work. And I've always liked the idea. It's just been a case of how are we going to do it? Where are we going to get the money? Will the grants come through? Whatever.
Yeah, and again, I think that why this is on the agenda is because it was staff driven and there is a different opportunity, and because reading through the criteria, we are so well suited for it. And I think that our community is also asking, how can we make better use of our larger spaces, especially those that are funded by taxpayer dollars. And I think, you know, Councillor Banford, I've heard from you for years. Where can some of our seniors safely walk in the winter? Is there space for that? So opening it up for more inclusion. Councillor Banford.
Councillor Sims is right. One of the things that I've always looked at is where do seniors have a place that they can walk in the winter, right? Like, I know we tried the high school at a certain period of time for an hour and a half a day or something. And I've had even discussions with the arena staff about something outside the arena that at least is covered with a lean-to, so it's like 3/4 of the way around the arena, back and forth, 8 foot wide, it's dry cement. One of the thoughts is that I think this came back to council from staff because about 3 or 4 years ago, we looked at trying to do someplace a conference center. And that's when we first looked at it. Council said, well, what about putting another floor in the arena? And that came from council, and it kind of came up for that conference center, larger meeting type things. So it came back to staff from an original council thing. I don't know whether this is the time to go ahead with it or not. I echo some of the concerns about staff workload and a big project type of a thing. And I'm not sure whether the grant's 100% funding. And then there's that whole issue on how you get it done, how you get it done ahead of time. So there's a whole, it's quite a complicated thing, but you're right. I mean, there's a bunch of things I'd love to see as far as, and she's right, one of the things is a place for seniors to walk. I've even discussed with staff about where we do the, around on our field, even having a covered thing, which then works as a walking thing in the winter, but in the summer when you're having the farmer's market, it's a shade area. So there's other options that are out there, but there's certainly things our community would need.
Yeah, and I think just on that, Councillor Banford, and I think staff reminded us in that report, is that when the dressing rooms were created, it was created with the intention to have a second floor. So it's not like we're looking at those modifications, that's the base level. So I think with that, all I'm looking for is just maybe a motion to push through that concept plan as tentatively approved in the budget, as we move that forward the same way we've done that. I think we did it for the backhoe as well. And just looking at it as a priority to fit into this. We're not bound to it. We're just looking forward and to maybe look at what we could create something. Mr. Thomas, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
We can certainly begin the process of finding a consultant to do the study for the district faster. With respect to this particular grant, I'm just looking at some of the requirements, and costs must be incurred by March 31st, 2023. And so it's a fairly ambitious timeline. Because the other things that council would also have to discuss is, let's say we got to the point where we have a wonderful design by an architect firm or engineering firm for what can be created and that's on the site. One thing council would have to understand and decide on is the operating model for that facility on an ongoing basis.
And that would have to be a joint thing between the TNRD and us, I'm sure.
Yep. So as I said, letters of support, community buy-in, where's the community flavor, getting ready to grow, and how do we, include more of our community into our community assets. So, Councillor Taylor.
Is this definitely the same funding source that you're referring to, Councillor Sim? This one's Tourism Relief Fund as opposed to infrastructure grant.
That's for us, it's an infrastructure. But
Okay,
it's also
but it's the relief fund. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
it is
making sure it was
fund.
the same one.
Yeah, I know, and that's why. It's because our infrastructure would actually grow to become a tourism asset. There's lots of communities that don't offer hockey training, and yet our hockey school is incredibly popular. We've got room to maybe do more. So it's basically creative envisioning, building off of something that's been brought forward for a concept plan by staff and where it could fit. Maybe it's called dating. There's no engagement ring or wedding yet. So with that, would anybody like to make a motion that staff move forward with this and maybe bring back a report of kind of where they see steps to go, and they can advise? Maybe it's too lofty of ambition, but at least we're giving some direction at this point in time.
Yeah, I'd be willing to make that motion just to kind of hear back on what the initial steps are.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on that motion?
So are we just looking for staff to say what are the steps? Or are we actually going to look for a contractor and how much money's in the budget to actually do a plan. I'm not sure what we're looking to do right now.
I think Councillor Herring has summarized it quite nicely, is let's look ahead at what those steps would involve, given the fact that we've allocated some money, and how to maybe actualize it. But I think we really need to get some steps ahead of us. And to be clear, that will address all of the questions. Is it too far out of our budget? What would be the operational costs? You know, how much staff time would this continue? We don't have those answers. This motion would allow us to be able to, you know, formulate next steps, should there be any. Have I articulated that right, Councillor Herring? Okay, go team. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? Okay, that's great. You guys, big picture dreaming. So with that, I think we'll make a motion to move out of it, and then we will bring this motion to the council table. Is that correct, Mr. Thomas? All right, motion.
Yes.
Okay, we're getting into this.
We're learning.
I know, isn't that great? Okay, so then over to you, Acting Mayor Herring.
All right.
Where I guess we
And
bring
did
this
we
motion
get a
forward.
motion? Did someone move that motion?
You did,
Okay, perfect.
but I think as the committee chair, I can bring that motion forward. Is that right, Mr. Thomas? Okay. So Councillor Herring, you're going to have to help me wordsmith, but essentially that council move to direct staff to investigate next steps of a project scope built on the concept plan for the Sportsplex to bring back to council.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of words, but I think the gist
When have I
is
been
in
short?
there.
When have I been short?
Yeah, I think you captured the gist of it. Does everyone kind of understand that? Mostly Mr. Thomas, that's clear to you what the motion is? Perfect. All right. So we have a motion made. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Taylor as a seconder, and any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, and that is passed. So moving on to 14.3, we have Parks, Recreation and Social Development. Councillor Banford.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and our next meeting is March 1st.
Okay. For standing committee reports, we have the Joint Services Advisory Committee, and that next meeting is April 11th. Select Committee Trails Task Force, Councillor Taylor.
The next meeting is February the 8th.
Okay, Community Economic Development Task Force, Councillor Fruzzo.
Next meeting is February 7th.
Cemetery Advisory Committee, Councillor Banford.
Our next meeting is February the 9th.
All right, Tourism Wells Gray, Councillor Sim.
The last Tourism Wells Gray meeting was last month, and I'm looking forward to receiving the minutes that can be shared with council.
Great. Wells Gray Community Forest Commission, Councillor Banford.
And the next meeting will be announced when we decide to have one. None scheduled right now.
Okay, and on to 18.1, which is staff reports, the CAO report for January. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Thomas?
We are extremely busy, and that's the most succinct way I can put it. We're working on finalizing budgets, and we hope to bring that back for council and the Government Operations Committee to look at on February 15, following which we would be looking for direction on going out for community consultation. And following that, it's the process of bringing it back for council and passing the bylaw accordingly. Nothing else to add at this point. We're working on procurement and gearing up for our procurement program for 2022. And with the policy in place now, we can hit the ground running. So thank you.
Great. Councillor Sim.
Yeah, so just to raise on that, so we've adjusted, and staff is suggesting the timeline for budget for public consultation to be moved. Do you have a tentative date that you could speak to right now, or you want to work through council first?
I would prefer to go through council first, but I can give you a very rough outline. So February 15th, let's, for discussion's sake, council authorizes us to go to consultation, we can do a number of things. We can do open house, we can do virtual between the 16th and the 23rd. And we're also planning on posting it online so people can submit their comments electronically as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. And I guess barring any, we have the next item, 18.2 Emergency Management Project Charter Update. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Smith, is he on? Chief Smith?
Chief Smith, yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas, Acting Mayor Herring, and Council. This is a staff report. Once we've looked into the planning process for the emergency management, we found it's rather large process. So we've updated our project charter timeline to include just doing the bylaw this year, looking at the HRVA, which is a hazard risk vulnerability analysis for wildfire for the district, which includes critical infrastructure assessments. Doing that prior to fire season, as the just the HRVA process, EMBC recommends is 44 weeks for a full-time staff person. So it's rather involved process. And then it's another 44 weeks after that to complete your plan. So we're just coming to council to update where we're looking at with our project charter for this, the bylaw and the plan.
To add some more context, we're working on accomplishing the chapter that deals specifically with wildfire risk management for the district. To get that done and put in place for this upcoming season, there are several other risks, such as the train tracks that goes through the community pipeline, a number of other risk factors that we also have to assess in their individual merits, and that we're proposing be taken as a secondary item. Rather, let's focus on getting it ready for the fire season.
Yeah, I'm totally super surprised that this is not included in our TNRD emergency management program. That $10,000 should totally cover 44 weeks of full-time work, right? Okay, so do we have any discussion from council? Any questions from council on that right now? I think for me, I'm totally in favor of, yeah, let's focus on the wildfire thing. An HRVA is something, it is a full-time staff job. And while we may be responsible for that municipally in BC, that's a lot to put on a community this size. You know, like components of that are like how we deal with pandemic and the animal epidemics and all that stuff. That's, you know, I think we can get to that, but maybe that's going to be something we chew off with a group of volunteers. You know, it's got to be something we kind of plan for. I think right now, let's focus on the wildfire stuff. That's my take on it anyways.
Yeah, what's the likelihood of a pandemic?
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, so this is just for information, correct? That we don't need to vote on this or anything?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, hearing no further discussion, I suppose we can move to the next point on the agenda, which there's no bylaws, no correspondence response required. Correspondence information items. If anyone would like to speak to these, let me know. There's a CEO press release from CN. There is the Nancy Cox letter regarding masks in elementary schools. And there is the North Thompson Arts Council. Seeing no items anyone would like to speak to, we have no notices of motion, no other business. Comments from the public. Do we have any comments from the public who's attending? All right, seeing none. Do we have an in-camera today? I don't believe so. Okay, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
I will motion, but only after saying, well done, Acting Mayor Herring. That's great job. Not easy, and that was masterful.
Thank you very much.
So motion to adjourn.
All right. So we've got a motion to adjourn. That's it for the day. Thanks, everyone.